Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of BC Plus Live. I'm your host, Jeremiah, W9JAM, with my co host.
Andy, KC9SKV.
And tonight we are joined by Michael.
Hello, good evening. I'm Michael, KB9VBR.
And for those of you who have seen his YouTube channel, it is KB9VBR Antennas. And he actually does a lot with POTA and different antenna testing and a whole bunch of stuff. So welcome, Michael. We are glad to have you here tonight.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Glad to be able to drop in. And yeah, you got me for this evening. So it should be a good time.
Well, we do have a list of questions for you. So we're going to get those knocked out. And then if you want to stick around afterwards, we're going to actually go over the new firmware for the 878 radios that came out just a couple days ago. So you are more than welcome to stick around for that. We are glad to have you again. And I know I've watched a lot of your videos when I was first getting into POTA. And I'm sure Andy has watched plenty of your videos as well. I'm originally from Indiana, so not too far from where you're located.
Yeah, I live in north central Wisconsin, so yeah, not too far, definitely. So an easy hit on 40 meters.
Yes. I actually have a long wire up in the backyard here that I use with my FT710 when I remember to turn it on. And I've talked to Wisconsin. I actually got Alaska with it one night.
All right.
And that was probably the highlight of my evening, was getting Alaska that night. Still working on trying to get Hawaii, though. I can get Australia. Haven't been able to hit Hawaii yet.
Hawaii can be a challenge. It's part of the problem. There's a few people that are really active down there, but it's just because of the time difference and propagation, it can be hit or miss. So.
Yes. Well, first thing that I've got to ask you is, how exactly did you get involved with amateur radio? Was it a friend, a relative?
All right. Well, this is it's a long and convoluted story, but it's something I'll try to compress down into just a short amount of time. I really my first interest or taste in ham radio, amateur radio, was probably, I was about 12 years old or so. I got a world band shortwave radio for Christmas. And when you get one of those, you start tuning the dial and you listen to all of this crazy stuff from all over the world. It kind of piques your interest. So picked out a book, went to the library, got a book on amateur radio, started reading it, maybe I can get my license or something like that. That'd be really cool. And decided, at that age, I just didn't have anybody to kind of take me to the next level, get my license and whatnot. So I still enjoyed the world band radio, but the ham radio part of it, that just went on the back burner for about 25 years. Well, no, not that long, maybe about 15 years. And then in 1999, got a scanner, and because we were having a lot of severe weather and that, and I wanted to be able to listen to police and fire. And what happens when you get a VHF scanner? Well, you start listening to stuff. Well, then you find the ham repeaters in the area and you start listening to those, and then you say, yeah, I was talking about getting my license, and got a copy. And now you're talking. And let's see, Tech Plus, the novice and the tech test back in '99, general in early 2000, and then I think my extra in '02, I believe. Or is it '01? In that time frame. So I just celebrated my 25th year as a ham radio operator this summer.
Oh, congratulations. Did not know
awesome.
That.
Yeah, so how do I celebrate? Well, I was at Hamvention and I signed up to be a member of the Quarter Century Wireless Association. So
nice. I'm not quite there yet.
That's what you do.
I think I've got another 10 years. All right. Andy, I think you've got a question.
Yeah, absolutely. what was your first amateur radio? Like what did you get first? What was it? What, transceiver wise?
Transceiver wise, great question. I got two radios. I got a, let's see, my in-laws, my wife's from the Milwaukee area, so my in-laws lived down in Brookfield, which is a stone's throw away from, back then it was AES, but now it's the ham radio outlet store down there. So I picked up an ICOM IC 2100 VHF 2-meter unit, put that in the car, and I found back on eBay back then a dual band Alinco to get me, so that I didn't have to sit in the car to play radio.
Awesome.
And that was my first two transceivers. I think I bought the two of those, within a couple weeks of each other to get on the air. And that's kind of, I got that. I still got that ICOM. I traded that Alinco a long time ago. Part of me wishes
but you still got the ICOM.
I still got the ICOM, and I think it's sitting next to me. I think that's the one that's sitting next to me on the desk here that I used as an APRS node for the longest time after it got replaced for something else in the vehicle.
Oh, very good.
Oh, okay. One question I've got is the antenna building.
Yep.
I know you've done a lot with different lengths of antennas and trying different configurations. What got you into that? Was it just trying everything out to try and get out further, or was it general curiosity, or just something you decided to try?
What happened was back so many years ago, I started, I built a 2-meter J-pole antenna. And it was, because I read an article and I wanted a, nice little antenna for that APRS node. And so I built one of those, and it worked really well. And I took it to field day because we were going to use it, for a demonstration station on field day. And after the event, one of the guys liked it a lot. He said, "Will you sell me that antenna?" And I said, "Sure, I can do that." So sold him it. So I had to make another one. And I said, well, if people are interested in this, maybe I should start selling them. So I started, this is back in 2001, I started selling 2-meter antennas on eBay. And then I built, soon after that, I built a website. And things just kind of grew from there. And to this day, I'm still selling VHF, UHF antennas. And that's kind of where the YouTube channel sort of got its start. I was using, about 10 years ago, I was going to start using YouTube as a marketing tool, and then that sort of got a mind of its own. And so, just things just start growing and snowballing, and then I start spreading, not so much selling these, but I start branching out into other antenna designs and experimentation and things like that, and I'm kind of growing with that. And now one of my favorite activities is portable operation, along with, antenna experimentation and whatnot.
Okay.
That's awesome. So do you remember the first antenna you built, and what was the design based on?
Yeah, the first one I built was, no, so the first one wasn't the J-pole. The first one was a 10-meter dipole antenna, because I was a Tech Plus, so I had access to the 10-meter band, and I picked up one of these ancient Radio Shack HTX 100 10-meter transceivers.
I remember those.
I was gonna put that on the air. So I built a 10-meter antenna, and I stuck it in the backyard, and it was the 10-meter band, and nothing happened.
Wow.
And I waited.
Yeah.
And I waited. And then something happened. But it's 10 meters is, I wish new hams would have access to something a little bit more than 10 meters, because it's as much fun as it is when the band is open. It can be just so frustrating when it's not, and it's more closed than open. But so that was probably the first thing. I actually put together, and then just kind of went from there. I think we built. I remember one year for field day, I decided to build a 6-meter antenna. So we were gonna. A friend of mine had a whole bunch of scrap aluminum from, I don't know where he got it from, old TV antennas or something like that. And we were going to build a 6-meter antenna for field day. We never really quite got it to work, unfortunately, but we were almost there. Almost,
but no cigar.
Yep, exactly.
All right. So next question,
Mhm.
when did you discover POTA? And
Okay.
for those who don't know what that is, it's called Parks on the Air, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about it.
Yep. So Parks on the Air is a program that really got it sort of grew out of another program called National Parks on the Air that the ARRL launched back in 2016, and this was going to be a year-long celebration of the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service. So the league, they were working with NPS and all that, and they had amateurs, they all of these national parks and forests and things all had numbers, much like POTA does these days. And hams were going to go into these national parks and make contacts, and everything would be uploaded to Logbook of the World, and it was going to be a great thing. Well, it was probably one of the most successful year-long events that the league has ever launched, and there was people that were sad to see it go. So a few individuals sort of created an offshoot of that called Parks on the Air, but they expanded its scope where any kind of state or federal entity could be assigned a number. And then you've got two groups of people. You've got your activators and you've got your hunters. The activators are the people that go out into the parks. They set up portable operations and make contacts. And then the hunters, they answer the calls, and I'm not going to say you get points, but you make contacts, and you collect the park numbers, and then you get awards and things like that. Just online awards. So that's the basis of the Parks on the Air program. As a hunter, I probably heard it, shortly after the National Parks on the Air program was sort of dissolved. And I think my first activation was October of 2019. So I've been doing that for about 5 years now, just going out doing portable operations activations in the great state and national parks that we have all around the country.
All right, awesome.
Awesome. So, next question. Can you tell us what exactly the purpose of POTA is? Loaded question.
Okay. I'm going to start off by saying, I'll tell you what POTA is not. POTA is not a contest. Okay. End of story. So what's the purpose of POTA, or Parks on the Air? I think it's just like anything amateur radio related. It's multi-pronged. I mean, it gets people stimulated to go out into a wild location, set up, and establish contact with somebody else. It gets people, that are at home and maybe have no intention of going out and setting up. It gives them opportunity to talk to people that are, doing these portable operations. They just sort of gamify the system, so you can collect these awards. To keep people, keep it fresh, so that people will still want to do it. And then finally, and I don't think this is, probably not the biggest part of it, but it is a significant part. It's one of those things where it gets us as hams out in the public to be visible in sort of a non-threatening kind of way. It's a lot of times, I'll be sitting on a picnic table, and I don't set up banners or signs or anything like that. I'm just doing my thing, and people will ask, well, what are you doing? And I say, well, ham radio. Oh, I heard about that. I had an uncle, I had a grandfather, I had a whatever that did ham radio, and it starts into an enjoyable little conversation. So it creates a certain amount of public visibility.
Yeah, because a lot of people they hear ham radio and or amateur radio,
Hmm.
and I'm sure you've had this happen at least once or twice. Had somebody that as soon as you say amateur radio, they're like, "Oh, you run one of those pirate radio stations?" It's like, no, not that kind of radio.
Not that kind of radio. Now, maybe back in the
Um,
70s.
and then you've
Yeah.
got to explain, what the difference is between
Mhm.
CB radio and amateur radio
Yep.
and all of that. And I agree, it's getting us out into the air, so to put it. So people actually see amateur radio in use
Yes.
and
Yeah.
they hear you
Absolutely.
talking to somebody across the country on a radio through radio waves, no cell phone service, no
Nothing.
communications plan that requires a monthly subscription, just
Yep.
open airwaves and a license
Just talking,
that
just talk
anybody
and
can get.
go.
Just that little black box there, and they go. So who do you talk to? I talk all over the world, and then I'll
Literally.
list. Yeah, I'll list maybe a couple countries and a half a dozen states that I've talked to in the last half hour or so, and they're just totally amazed. They go, with that, he says, yeah, with that, and it's so I don't know, if it creates any kind of spark in people. It definitely opens their eyes a little bit to what amateur radio can be. So you don't think of it as a more abstract concept. Oh, yeah, I had an uncle with a CB radio in his car or something like that. So it's yeah, we're a little bit
Yeah.
more than that. But it's not like sort of that when you get into the sort of the emergency communications aspect of things, is where it's people see that. It's just and I've done a lot of that too, but it's just a little bit more friendly, approachable kind of aspect to the hobby.
Yeah. So one thing that I'd like to know is what is probably your favorite activation site? I know for me, it was Joshua Tree National Park when I lived in California, or San Jacinto Mountain.
Oh my gosh. So I've got some places that are just absolutely gorgeous to go to. I think one of my favorites is probably, well, one favorite is my local park, because if you're familiar with the state of Wisconsin, I live in the city of Wausau, which is the north central part of the state, and we got a larger hill out on the outskirts of the city, and there's a state park on the top of it. So I go up there to the Rib Mountain State Park, and I sit 600-700 feet above everybody else, and I get this commanding view of the area. So that's I like that place. But probably my all-time favorite places to activate is my wife and I's favorite vacation spot. We like to head up to Lake Superior a couple times a year, and we'll go out into in northern Wisconsin, Lake Superior, Chequamegon Bay, to Madeline Island, and there's this beautiful beach on the shore of the lake, and you just sit there on the beach, and you can listen to the waves and talk to just about anybody.
Good stuff. Absolutely. That's great. So personally, I'm curious, do you prefer QRP or 100 watts for POTA?
I do it all. Traditionally, I don't run the full 100 watts. I usually run about 50 to save my battery, but that's another story. So I like doing that. But within about the last year, I finally picked up a nice QRP radio, and I've been using that more and more. And QRP is a lot of fun. What I've found is that I go out so often, and my call sign is so recognizable sometimes. And if the band conditions are really good, it's just a massive pileup, and I have to deal with this massive pileup for the next 2 hours. And I love it. I love talking to everybody, but sometimes that just gets to be too much, and I find that, well, okay, so I'll dial it all back down, and maybe we'll do QRP with a magnetic loop antenna, something like that. And that all of a sudden that just kind of that ratchets up my skill level, because now I have to work harder to get those contacts. So it's it becomes really I found QRP to become increasingly enjoyable. And I got people that there's a couple of friends of mine that just keep needling me that I gotta get my code working again. So they say that you can really enjoy QRP.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't disagree. I'm working on coding myself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So what is your go-to radio for POTA? For me, I bounce between the Yaesu and the ICOM.
Yep. Almost exclusively Yaesu FT891. And then for when I go QRP, I've got a Yaesu FT817 ND. So those are my POTA radios. In the shack, I've got a larger FTDX 3000 that I bought about 4 years ago. Before they right before they switched to they're all SDR designs.
SDR,
but, it's still an excellent. It's got a super hot receive on it, so I'm not giving it up anytime soon.
That's fair, and I'm considering a 101 MP. It's a dream radio for me, and it's just a lot. It's just a lot of money, but it's number one on the Sherwing list. So very interested in that.
Yeah. My first HF radio was an ICOM. Remember the old 718, and I had that thing for like 20 years, just for an insanely long period of time. And you get to a point where it's just like, I got to stretch things a little bit. And,
absolutely. So, what's been the biggest thing that surprised you about POTA?
The biggest thing that surprised me is probably, I cannot believe how big it is. It is just, it just astounds me, the number of people that are active in it, participating in the program in one way, shape, or form. I've seen on the POTA spotting page, 200 spots on the bands. It's just amazing. 200 active Parks on the Air activators, all at one time.
It's crazy.
And if you're going out to activate, you're trying to figure out, okay, where can I squeeze in here between these guys?
Yeah,
because they are so close together on the band.
It's insane. And I just think about that, when I had my first couple activations, it's like I spent more time explaining what I was doing than getting people in the log. So it's just that's crazy.
All right. So this one is about one of the videos you did.
Mm-hmm.
The metal screen.
Yes.
I remember watching that one and thinking, I'm going to have to try that at some point in time. Can you explain what the whole thing behind the metal screen was and how well that actually worked?
Yeah, I can do that. So, good friend of mine, Dave, KZ9V, he lives about an hour and a half away. But he's retired, broadcast engineer, and he's kind of become, my muse, because he's the guy that comes up with these crazy ideas. And he says, well, what do you think? Do you think we can make this work? And we got to do a video on it. And I says, yeah, let's do it. So, one day, was this about a year ago? So, we finished up a QSO party. We were doing mobile for the Wisconsin QSO party, and the primary antenna was a Wolf River coil style antenna. He had it bolted to the back of his truck, and the truck was the ground plane. So that got him to thinking, well, if we can use like our vehicles as ground planes for these HF antennas, what happens if I go and get a roll of window screen and put it on the ground and put the antenna on it? Will that act as a ground plane? And sure enough, it did. it worked for him. And I says, yeah, of course it's going to work. So then, because it's just like your truck, and he agreed. So I did a little bit of research, and because I want to figure out, well, we can't be the first people that came up with this cockamamie idea, and sure enough, we weren't. So I started digging through the archives. I found a magazine article from 1977. Bob Sherwood, the guy that does those Sherwood tests on amateur radio receivers.
Yes.
Back in the 70s, he was living in a constrained space, and he put mesh down all over his backyard for his HF vertical. And he wrote a magazine article about it. So I said, I found this magazine article. And he says, here, so Dave, this is your proof. This thing works. And he said, sure enough. And we made a video. And basically what happens is you take a roll of window screen, which is about 36 by 84 inches, put it on the ground, and you put your vertical antenna on top of it. You get a good connection from the ground side of the antenna to the screen. And then that screen, and no radials. The screen is your radials, but that mass of window screen acts as a capacitive coupler to the ground, and that's your ground network. Because when you put remember, when you put radials on the ground, they don't have to be a specific length. The more radials you put down, the more surface area you cover, the more gain you're going to affect, or I shouldn't say the more gain. What's going to happen is the less ground losses you're going to incur. So what happened? So we put a big screen down instead, because we got a lot of surface area and a small amount of space. It does the same thing. It's and we measured it. Yep, sure. It's almost 2 to 3. An equivalent amount of ground radials compared to a similar size window screen, a 2 to 3 dB increase, or I should say, less ground losses, from the conventional radials. And I did the video, and that just took off like a storm, and it was like for hundreds of portable operators, it just became a game changer, because now you're not stringing radials everywhere. You can, just lay down some screen, or that metallic fabric, that Faraday cloth, that works great too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Greg, AI5HV actually just asked about that Faraday fabric.
Yep.
Yes.
In the chat.
Same stuff, same concept. You run a continuity tester across that fabric, and it just beeps all day. So it works just like the window screen does.
All right. I think Andy's got another question on that, and I actually have a comment about the chicken wire question that came in on Zoom.
Yeah, quick question, Jared. Does our YouTube automatically end at 30?
I think today we're going to let it go over just a little bit for the interview.
Awesome. That's perfect. Get through the rest of these. So my personal question, I'm just curious, and I think I probably know what the answer is, because I've kind of moved over towards that direction as well. And I think a lot of people have, and I understand why, but sometimes there's some old school people. What would you say your favorite battery type is, and why for POTA activation?
Favorite battery type, like battery chemistry, or
yes, absolutely. Not necessarily a brand. I'm a DIYer. I like to build my own, but I do it with Life PO4 chemistry. Lithium
iron phosphate all the way. My gosh, once you use one of those batteries, it is just they're totally amazing. When my friend Joe and I, when we started doing national parks on the air, we were lugging Group 24 batteries. We were lugging AGM batteries out into the field, and those suckers are heavy.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
And they don't last very long. And when the first LifePo batteries came out, it's like they were expensive. But one of the guys in the club got one, and he just loved it. And we were just amazed with that. And it took me like a couple years for me to get my own, when the price came down to a reasonable amount. And now it's just it, you know,
It's
night and
it's
day
crazy.
difference. It is. It is.
And you can get 100 amp hour life PO4 for a couple $100 now.
Yeah. Oh
They're
yeah.
cheap.
They're dirt cheap, and you know, it's like I spent 80. You know, when the last AGM battery I bought, I probably spent like $80 for it. You know, this was 5-6 years ago, and 30 amp hours, which in lead acid terminology only means 15 amp hours because you can't deplete it, you know, below
Correct.
12 volts. So under
Absolutely.
load.
Absolutely.
And, or I should say 50%, you know, not 12 volts, but
Yeah.
50% depletion.
Correct.
And they, you know, maybe a year later, I bought a 12 amp hour LifePo battery for the same amount of money. And I can draw it down to 90%.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. And personally, I've got I not this last Hamvention, but the one before, I picked up a Bieno 40 amp hour one. But then, you know, I realized, hey, you can build these as well. You know, you can go get 100 amp hour cells, add yourself a battery management system, put it in a box, and you're good to go.
And you're good to go. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm not a big money spender on LifePo batteries. There's a few brands that I like that are really, really cheap. So Amazon. That's the route I go. Yep. Amazon.
Absolutely.
So,
All right. So I let Andy lead the way on the battery question there because I am not good with soldering at all, and I'm likely to blow myself up with the
I do batteries
battery.
Yep.
I let the professional
do
do it here. So I heard you mention the Wolf River coil style antenna. So is it fair to say that's probably your favorite POTA antenna?
Probably. I do like the quarter wave vertical, and so because it deploys really, really quick, and it works reasonably well. So the 17-foot whip, and for 20 meters and above, the Wolf River Sporty 40 for the 40-meter band is just a great complement to that. You know, if I want, I've got their larger, you know, Silver Bullet 1000 that I can, you know, bring things down to 80 meters if I wish, and I do that a few times, but that's probably that's quarter wave vertical is my go-to POTA activation antenna, just because of its expediency, and it delivers good results. If we're out camping for the weekend and I like to, you know, I know I'm going to be on multiple bands, you know, maybe want to get those 10 bands for the N1CC award or something like that. I'll put up my second choice is the 71-foot long end-fed random wire antenna with the 9-to-1 transformer, and then just couple that with an external tuner, and I've got everything I want for the entire weekend.
Yeah. I tried setting up a 40-meter half wave end-fed antenna in Joshua Tree, and when you get to Joshua Tree, you forget that it's a lot of cactuses and Joshua trees.
Yep.
So there's not anything that you're allowed to hook an antenna to. So the best I could do is get one of those tire mounts that you put under your tire in the fiberglass mass, and then run the antenna up that, and then run the wire down to the ground and have a series of rocks that are stacked together to tie some rope to. So that was the best I got with that one. Then I'm like, okay, it's time to just do the mount on the hood of the car and do it that way.
Run a Tar Heel.
There you go. In the wintertime, I break out the ham sticks because you know, it's cold here in Wisconsin, and I can slap that mag mount on the car in like 15 seconds or less.
And you're good to go.
I actually have one of those ham sticks, the 20-meter one, that I actually have specifically for the car, as well as a Yaesu ATOS 120 for if I decide to take the 710 out of the house with me. So that's kind of my go-to POTA setup right now, because I can stay in the car and just roll the windows down and then plug in the battery in the passenger seat.
Yep. There you go. Yeah. Usually what I usually do if I'm in a winter, if I'm sitting in the car, I'll put the battery in the back seat, but then just run the cables up to the front seat, and I'll just switch over to the passenger side to activate, because then the steering wheel doesn't get in my way. But
exactly.
Put the seat all the way back, so you got all that leg room, and you don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
You just got to relax and do a thing.
Yeah, just relax, and I can go for about an hour before the car gets so cold that I got to turn the heater back on, and by then I want to change bands anyway. So
absolutely,
yes. Kind of a self-fulfilling timer, if it were.
Yep.
And the last question here we have on our list, this was one of mine. Do you have a favorite coax that you use with your activations?
This is probably an unpopular opinion, but I believe that coax is a consumable item, and I do not spend a lot of money on coax. RG8X all the way. Currently, I've been using. I carry 3 pieces of coax with me: a 50-footer and 2 25-footers. They're all 8X. And I think my current 50-footer is manufactured by ABR. I like it. It's great coax. I don't like it because in the wintertime, it gets really stiff. But other than that, it's really good coax. And I know that, I don't buy that 50-foot roll. I think it costs me, maybe like $55 or so. Not that expensive. And I know that it's going to last me for probably a couple seasons. It's going to get trampled on, or usually what happens is the little, the PLs, they start to get a little dinged up, so they don't thread too well. And that's right. When that happens, it's that coax will go into backup status, and I'll just get myself another 50-foot piece. Because you can get,
awesome.
you can get as much, you can spend the big money on the armored stuff and all that, but more often than not, it's the connector that's going to fail on you before the shielding.
Yeah, and for me personally, that's where I just replace the connector, and
there you go.
Cost me a few bucks for a nice, name brand Teflon connector, in about 10 minutes of my time, I'm good to go.
Yep, I do that. I've done that too. I've had a few where they threw out, however much use the coax just pulled right out of the connector.
Yep.
So maybe the braid wasn't.
I've had that.
Yeah, so that's why I always carry the spare piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, spares are definitely important to have.
Spares are great
if you're
to
doing
have.
An activation. So somebody asked me in a direct message about the chicken wire story. For me, when I was living in Cathedral City, California, right outside of Palm Springs, I was trying to figure out how I could get my little Tar Heel 2 working without, dealing with putting a mount on the car. And when I called Tar Heel about it, they said, well, if you've got an area of the house that you don't walk in, like under a couch or a rug, get some chicken wire and actually attach the little Tar Heel 2 to that and run it under the couch. And that should act as enough of a ground plane, but make sure it's the closely knit chicken wire. And I'm thinking to myself, I thought chicken wire was only one design. I didn't realize they had different size holes in chicken wire.
Yep.
So but that's the story. I
know a lot of people ask me, well, can I use chicken wire as my ground plane? And I said, yeah, you can, but the downside with chicken wire is the way it's constructed, that these wires are all kind of twisted together. And if that's what, if you bury that wire, if it's in contact with the ground for a long period of time, that rust, it starts to corrode. And it corrodes in those little twists, and that corrosion point actually creates noise on the.
Yep.
You know, you'll hear this weird clicking noise, and you go, "What?"
And it's right from that. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's right from that. So if you're thinking about burying mesh, hardware cloth, you know, that's something that's got, you know, where those pieces are all welded together or brazed together. It's so they don't corrode like that.
Well, for anybody who is wondering where you can find Michael on YouTube, you want to tell them where they can find you?
Sure. My website where I've got my antennas, www.jpol-antenna.com. My YouTube channel is KB9VBR antennas. If you just type my call sign into the Google search bar, you will get to I've been online for so long, it will get you to every place you need to be.
That just means your SEO is working.
It's absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I play the long game.
Yes. So, for everybody who is watching on YouTube, thank you for tuning in tonight. All of our BC Plus members, please stick around on Zoom. And we're going to go ahead and hop off YouTube and get into the firmware part of tonight. And Michael, you are more than welcome to hang out with us as we go through updating the firmware on the 878. It'll actually be very close to the same procedure as the new 168.
Yes.
For updating the firmware. So a lot of the same steps. So again, for everybody who tuned in on YouTube, thank you for being here tonight. I'm your host, Jeremiah, W9JAM, with our special guest,
Michael, KB9VBR.
And our co-host,
Andy, KC9SKV.